Welcome to another episode of This Week in Goldmaking, presented by Darkshore Capital. Today is July 30th, 2018, and I've added the EU region pricing data to our market update. It was requested a couple weeks ago. I neglected to do it last week due to the API being down. Turned out the API was actually not down on the EU, something I did not know since I don't play on the EU realms. But now we know. All right, so here you go. There's the comparison. We can take a look and see how things are different. I would say that overall, my prediction is fairly accurate. The biggest glaring difference, aside from the WoW token prices, of course, being wildly different, is this week Legion materials prices just tanked like crazy. And that's probably somewhat due to the fact that the API was down for about a week. So, we'll keep track of that towards the end of the expansion and then going onwards. But yeah, as you can see, like all the kind of the wide broad strokes are more or less the same. There's a large dip since the inception with the Legion materials. The kind of weird ore stuff is a little wonky. I mean, Ghost Iron ore has seen a huge increase since the beginning of the expansion on both sides of the pond. And then same kind of deal with the mounts, roughly the same-ish. And there's certainly variations, but we're going to keep an eye on things as it goes forward, of course. That's kind of been the whole idea with this. And then only other thing I want to note is ATVI, stock price for Activision Blizzard, was down 8% this week. My interpretation of that is it's probably largely due to market forces beyond just the company itself. So no need to panic. Blizzard's doing fine. It's just the economy in the US doing things. But we won't get into that now. All right, moving on to the news. Just a few pieces of news for this week. One big one, which I thought was a little interesting, the Universal Language Module, which was part of the Garrison Auction House requirements, is no longer required. I believe this is the one from Ashran, which, kind of makes sense. Ashran's sort of going away with the next expansion, so in theory you wouldn't have been able to complete that quest without it. So it could have really gone one of two ways. Either that item becomes incredibly valuable because it's impossible to get, or what actually happened, which is it's just gone, and people who invested millions of gold have now items that are worth nothing. So buyer beware, I suppose. Another interesting development, this isn't really a traditional news piece, but it's just something I've noticed playing the game a little bit recently. The prices for old world profession items, I'm talking about both raw materials and then like sort of half raw materials, are changing drastically because there are a significant number of people who did not have maximum level old world professions going into the pre-patch and now have to play a little bit of catch up on some of the older recipes. So like say you got a fail steel long blade pattern to drop for your blacksmith and you didn't have your blacksmithing leveled up, so now you got to go back and craft a bunch of Burning Crusade stuff to get it leveled up so you can learn it. All right, well, that means that there's some shifts in the materials there. So the one specific example that kind of caught my eye for this, I was going to do some blacksmith crafting, transmog crafting, and there were no heavy grinding stones, which is just like an intermediate material for blacksmithing for vanilla. And what I had to do was go buy a bunch of heavy stone to make the heavy grinding stones. So what that tells me is that those heavy grinding stones are probably being used in some recipe to level up vanilla blacksmithing crafting. And two takeaways from that. Number one, there's probably a lot of money to be made from finding and posting the correct materials that people need. And number two, there's probably a lot of things that are getting crafted for leveling up and not to make any money. So if any of those items are useful for any of your crafts for, say, transmog down the road, now might be a great time to pick them up. One potential thing might be bars versus ore. I know that there's often some interesting dynamics that happen with bars versus ore depending on which one is actually more valuable at the time. So, no specifics on that, but just something to think about, maybe something to look into if you're looking for a new market to explore. And finally, the last piece of news is, of course, Straight Skill Master 4 was released and is in full-on release mode. No more beta. That's what it is. Which brings us to our main topic for today. which is just a brief little reminder that at the end of the day, we're making gold here. And a true goblin makes gold no matter what the circumstance. Tools are great. Tools make your job easier. But when it really comes down to it, it's pitting your mind against other minds and coming up with the best solution. I think it's very appropriate to leave good feedback and constructive feedback on tools that may not be performing to your standards or doing what you'd like them to do. But provide your feedback and move on. There's gold to be made. You've got better things to do. You've got more important things to do than sit around and complain about things or read what other people are complaining about. Get out there and make some gold. All right, a few questions this week. Number one, how do you decide what BOE greens are worth trying to auction versus disenchant? Really kind of comes down to personal preference. My barometer at this point is basically, did the green that, or the BOE that dropped, does it show up with the Fat Loot's Gold blog transmog group on the tooltip? And if it does, then it just gets mailed automatically to my transmog poster. And if not, I'd probably just sell it, to be honest. The Gold Queen would probably have my head for saying so, but man, the time involved in disenchanting things is obnoxious. I do have a setup where I can kind of do it while I'm AFK somewhat, but and it's not using the consortium tool or whatever. It's something different, which I'll get to it someday during a video. It's just so much of a hassle. All right, second question: how can I quick sell items without crashing auction house prices? I like this question a lot because it allows me to talk about something which I think is severely underutilized, which of course is trade chat. Believe it or not, trade chat is still useful for things aside from horrible political discussions and stupid WoW memes that will not die. You can, not in addition to finding great deals through trade chat, you can just type what you want to sell, and as long as you're tending to that and spend a decent amount of time doing it, you will find buyers. And you'll be really surprised if you do this enough and actually kind of engage with people and try and get them to sell. Like maybe spice up a little bit, like make it exciting. If you're trying to sell some transmog pieces, describe it a little bit, or entice people in some way. This is actually a great time to utilize your second account on your second monitor. If you have access to that type of technology, I would highly recommend doing so. Last question, what do you do with Spirits of Harmony? I answered this one actually a little bit tongue-in-cheek on the Reddit post, which was asking it by saying I just stare at them sitting in my guild bank, which unfortunately is true most of the time. I did purchase a ton of Spirits of Harmony a little while back when they were suspiciously cheap. We'll just leave it at that. And I have been using them to make Panther mounts, mostly buying like the Golden Lotus. Though I realized I made a bit of a mistake and didn't really keep all the Spirits of Harmony or Panther materials with my Jewel Crafter when it was transferred to a different server. But there are still plenty of Mists of Pandaria materials which are useful on the server. All those spirits are still on. So really just take a bit of work, maybe pull up a nice Excel spreadsheet. Any excuse to pull up a spreadsheet is a good excuse in my book. And just get the prices, compare them to Spirit of Harmony price. Just do a little bit of Spirit of Harmony arbitrage. If you need to convert the spirits into cash quickly, do it that way. Or if you're just doing some crafting and say you need some exotic leather or maybe some ghost iron ore for something, explore that as an option as well. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you again for watching. My name is Andrew. This has been a presentation of a weekly gold making podcast brought to you by Darkshore Capital. If you have any comments, questions, inquiries, you can feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube video or find me on Twitter. Handle is @DarkshoreCap, or you can always email me, darkshorecapital@gmail.com. So please check out my Twitch stream. It's twitch.tv/darkshore_capital. I do stream there from time to time. That's going to do it. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching, and happy gold making.